Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Wallace, Executive Director at the Center for Photography at Woodstock here in Kingston, New York. And I'm also the guest presenter tonight for our series, Meet the Artist, where every week, Thursday at 6 o'clock, we present here and online discussions with noted photographers and artists, all brought to you through the generous support of the Arnold and Augusta Newman Foundation. Tonight, we're very excited to have with us the noted author, artist, photographer, professor, photo book publisher, Mark Alice Durant of St. Lucie Books. Tonight, we're very lucky because Durant will read from his exciting, newly published book, Summer of the White Fox and After, published by St. Lucie Books in 2024. A thrilling, poetic, disconcerting, and transcendent journey. Make sure and check it out. And there are copies on the back table, as well as publications that Durant has published under the pioneering mission of St. Lucie Books, an artist book publisher that he's spearheaded since 2017 and for which he serves as publisher and editor. St. Lucie Books has published amazing photo books by such leading artists as Laura Larson, Oliver Wassow, and others. Mark is going to talk tonight about his own writing, his own work, as well as his publishing. Mark is a professor at UMBC in Baltimore, the University of Maryland, Baltimore campus. And he's also the author of a number of amazing books, including Blur of the Otherworldly, Contemporary Art, Technology, and the Paranormal, 27 Contexts, An Anecdotal History of Photography, and Maya Deren, Choreographed for Camera. So we're very excited to welcome him here tonight, and feel free to ask him questions about all those amazing projects. Mark?
Thank you so much. Thanks, Brian. Just want to shout out to the staff here, Sarah and Brian and Anna and Nicole. Thank you so much for the invitation. I also want to shout out to Brian, because Brian was one of the first people in the real art world who kind of gave me a break when he was an editor at Art in America a long time ago. And I wrote some short pieces for Brian, and he said yes to me. And so anything that I've written after that, we can blame on you, because you started it while rolling. Anyway, so I'm going to talk a little bit about St. Lucie Books, and then do reading from Summer of the White Fox. And I hope that there'll be some questions and along the way, or afterwards. But if you have anything during, you can shout out too. So now, is the projector on? Or do I have... So it's going to warm up for a second. I can't talk without images, so I'll just wait. I can start, I guess. So as Brian mentioned, I started St. Lucie Books in 2017, really as in a moment of frustration. I've been making arts, making pictures, writing, etc. I've been involved, in books and books projects and publications for many years. Knew a lot of people who were making, making books, doing small book publishing, independent publishing. And so I was shopping a book around 27 Contexts that I had finished in 2016, and sending it to the usual suspects, and no one would publish it. I mean, people were nice to me, but they said, "What is this? It's sort of like photo history, but not. It's photo theory, but not. It's kind of a memoir, but not. It's a monograph, but not." And I said, "Exactly." So I was frustrated. Hey, Corinne, I was slightly frustrated, and I knew around that time that Laura Larson, who was not a friend of mine at that point, but I knew professionally, was shopping her book Hidden Mother around. And so I reached out to her and I asked her who was publishing her book. And she said, "Oh, no one, because they're saying it's a photo history, but not. It's theory, but not. It's memoir, but not." And I'm like, exactly, right? What are we going to do? And after that phone call, I think it was that evening, I was laying on my couch and I thought, maybe I should start a press. And I called Laura the next, or maybe I emailed her, but I don't remember, but the next day. And I said, if I started a press, could I publish Hidden Mother? And she doesn't even hesitate. She just said yes. And that was like the moment, right, where my life pivoted and has been consumed by this wonderful project. So in some ways, I feel like it was a gift. It was a gift of trust that somebody said yes, and then we collaborated on that. So Hidden Mother was the first book that was published. I just want to say a little bit about the logo comes from this Francesco del Cosa painting from 1475, which hangs at the National Gallery of Art. And it's obviously that little detail of the hand. If you don't know, the kind of iconography of Catholicism, St. Lucy, the story is that she was, of course, a virgin, 3rd century virgin living in Sicily who was betrothed to a pagan prince and refused to marry him because she wanted to devote her life to Christ. And he wasn't having it. So, she suffered numerous tortures, including having her eyes gouged out, and typically, gory Catholic story. So if you Google St. Lucy, you'll see the standard image of her is a platter with 2 eyes on it. Maybe you've seen that. But this is a very unusual representation of St. Lucy, a regal St. Lucy, in which she's proffering these eyes instead of blossoms. And I just found that extraordinary. And the first time I saw that, I thought, oh, that's it. All right. So as I was mentioning, Hidden Mother. It was a gift of trust that I think started St. Lucy. And I feel like that initial gesture is the kind of ethos of what St. Lucy is now, which is that it's deeply collaborative. I think it's very personal. We work on one book at a time. And deep collaboration between me, the artist, and the designer. So just to go through a couple of books, if you don't know Hidden Mother, it's an extraordinary book. It's sold out in 2022, but we're actually doing a second printing, which is arriving next week. So it'll be available again. Then that's my book, 27 Contexts, which sort of is a series of essays, starting with my childhood obsession with my parents' wedding album, which was the most elegant thing in my family's life, my family's home. And I talk about the sort of ritual. I think I was like kind of baptized into photography through my parents' wedding album, and so it's an essay about that. And then there's a variety of essays in that book, including an homage to Larry Sultan, who was my teacher and also became my friend later. And then I live in Baltimore, so everybody's like, people in Baltimore, oh, The Wire or John Waters, like, yeah, yes, but. So it's an essay about that sort of kind of the image of Baltimore and the cultural imagination. Anyway, so there are other books, Conversations, which are basically long, wide-ranging conversations with those 5 photographers. Local artist here, Alder Wasso, who's our 4th book, Friends, Enemies, and Strangers. So combines his love of vernacular photography, his photographs of family and friends, and then obviously these sort of horrific tweaked images of the Trump administration and various minions. And it came out in 2018, the sort of middle of the Trump administration. I think it's in some ways a document of that era. There's a book I edited called Running, Falling, Flying, Floating, Crawling, which is a variety of images bodies, in those various states. And then I asked various writers to respond to these images. There was a whole bunch of different writers in that, 25 writers, and I think 50 artists or so. And then I work with Bree Souders to make, I guess in some ways it's a kind of monograph. It sort of gathers 5 bodies of her work with an essays by Susan Bright and Kim Beale. It's really gorgeous. Every book is like, I learn something. I learn a lot because I'm naive. I'm kind of a new bookmaker. And so every project is different from the previous one, not only because of the personality of the person we're working with, but also the requirements of that work. Like what is the proper vessel for that work, right? So there's a lot of talk about scale and paper. And I mean, it's normal stuff that publishers will talk about. All of these books are on the back table, so if you're interested in seeing them, feel free. And if you have any questions about them, please let me know. Odette England's Dairy Character came out, was the 5th book, I think. And this was designed by Tara Buzzell, who's an old friend of hers. If you don't know, Odette grew up on a dairy farm in southern Australia in the 70s, and this is a kind of meditation, both photographic and textual, about the sort of gendered environment of the dairy farm of that era. Did a second book with Laura Larson called The City of Incurable Women that came out in 2022, or I think 2, yeah. So one of the things that Laura is really interested in is to work with archival photographic material. So in this case, she's working with a series of photographs that are from this asylum in Paris where this Charcot character worked. And he pathologized the idea of women's hysteria and made a series of photographs, of staged photographs, illustrating what women's hysteria looks like, and it became kind of a kind of touchstone for this pathology. And so she takes these photographs and creates a relationship to them, that's both haptic and visual and textual. So she makes photographs. She writes these texts that trying to imagine the inner lives of these women. She tells a little bit of expository history of that asylum. And then talks about Charcot, gives a little background on Charcot, and then uses some of those photographs and then tells stories about those women. Some of the stories imagined, some of them real, and then makes photographs in response, as if to create a kind of gestural connection between the 21st century and the 19th century, if that makes sense. So as Brian mentioned, I've been a Maya Deren acolyte, Maya Deren, the great experimental filmmaker from the 40s and 50s. I think most people who see a Maya Deren film are just like, oh, right, Maya Deren. Somehow it gets in there, even to this day. And so I just took the opportunity as a teacher to talk about Maya Deren whenever I could, and I wrote a few essays about her images here and there. And every time I would go to the archive, I would ask the archivist, I'm like, so who's writing a biography? And they would say, nobody's writing a biography. There's tons of scholarship. There's a really amazing documentary film about her. And of course, there are her films. And she's a legendary figure, but there's no biography for a general audience, despite the fact that she was unbelievably brilliant, had this really dramatic life, knew everyone, was like the center of the kind of literary cultural world in Greenwich Village in the 40s and 50s, not to mention the incredible power of her imagery. And she was a great writer, and not pretty good looking herself, very charismatic. And so I could never understand why there wasn't why there wasn't a biography. So long story short, I ended up taking it on. I had a lot of skepticism around that, but eventually I just sort of gave into it. And I made several attempts to write the biography in the early 2000s, and they were failures. And then just before the pandemic, I decided to go back to it. And so that's what happens. This came out in 2022. She has this great line, which is like, I make my pictures what Hollywood spends on lipstick. So Witness Mark is a monograph Clea McKenna's work. Clea McKenna is a Bay Area photographic artist who makes these extraordinarily, her work is very physical. Every image object is sort of made with this incredible involvement, physical involvement with her own body and also often with the natural world. She's done things like photograms of rainstorms in the Hawaiian rainforest where she grew up off the grid with her dad, Terrence McKenna. Some of you may know who that is. And so there's a kind of like, that's sort of a kind of subtext to the work to some extent. But anyway, there's a sort of sense of a connection to the earth, a sort of spiritual questing, I would say. And her images are not only, they're photograms, but they're also they're photo objects. They're abraded into the things that she's making images of. So she'll take a piece of photographic paper and rub it against the actual object, right? And then light it from various angles in the dark to create these sort of, these extraordinary image objects. And the challenge as a bookmaker for this kind of work is not only scale, but also how do you indicate the texture of such objects, right? I have to say, it was very challenging, but we did things like leaving the shadow underneath, so things would be photographed on the wall. We'd leave a shadow so you get a sense that it actually came away from the wall, that it had a sense of volume and presence physically, that it wasn't just a picture of a thing, that it was a thing itself, the photo object itself. And our most recent book is, and this came out just this summer. I'm sorry, there's a funky image there. Sorry, it's all kind of doing something weird. But it's Regina DeLuise, The Hands of My Friends. And Regina just retired from teaching at MICA in Baltimore for many years. Extraordinarily sensitive photographer, works with large format 8x10 camera, often making platinum prints and that sort of thing. But there's this really delicate, classic, but very tender, very thoughtful, very, carefully seen photographs. Despite the sort of 19th century processes, I don't find them nostalgic and everywhere. I find them very, very present. And anyway, just really lovely pictures. So again, that book is back there if you want to look at it. And our next book, which is coming out like in a month, is Donna McAdams' Black Box, a photographic memoir. I don't have any images of that, but it's, if you know Donna's work, she's basically been photographing for 50 years, from the 70s up till now. Any famous, performance artist, from the 70s, 80s, or 90s was photographed by Donna McAdams, and Aperture did a book of hers called Caught in the Act in the 90s. Anyway, but she's combining the whole kind of chronology of her work with these small little anecdotes, for lack of a better term, about her life as an artist, as a woman, as an activist, etc. Really, I think a really special book. I'm really looking forward to that. All right, so, and that's wonderful designer Gannett Abraham, who's my colleague at the University of Maryland, who has designed 10 of the 13 books. And she's the best. Just want to put a shout out to Gannett. All right, so I'm going to talk about Summer of the White Fox. I'll do a little bit of reading, and hopefully there'll be some questions. And I do have some copies here. If anybody wants a copy, I can sign it for you if you're interested in that sort of thing afterwards. So I want to get a little bit of just a kind of overall kind of shape of the book. The book is small, purposefully. It's got black edging on the pages. It, as you can see, my name is not on the cover. It's on the spine, and it's this very small title. I want it to be physically like a secret, like a little box that you would open up somehow, and it would start whispering to you or something like that. Because what this does is chronicle a series of experiences that I had. It's a deeply personal book. Although it is about other things, photography and mysticism and other things that sort of expand out from my experiences. it's almost like I didn't want to tell the story because some of it is very, very private. But at the same time, I really felt compelled. I mean, I know people say that, but I felt like I could not move on with my life until I did that. And my wife was like, "Why are you revisiting that?" I'm like, "I must." But anyway, so I work with a designer, Caleb Kane Marcus, on this project for lots of different reasons. Gannett was very busy and couldn't really take it on in time I wanted to do it. But also Caleb is really, he has an incredible facility at the haptic, the physical qualities of books. And I wanted to work with him and sort of see what happened. And so I decided to do it with a book of mine in case it fucked up. I don't want to blame myself, right? So anyway, but it turned out great, and Caleb was amazing. So the story is, I'll just tell you the book is kind of like in 4 sections. There's a kind of introduction. There's this appearance of the white fox, and then there's a kind of short kind of section about the autumn. And then there's a section about the last ends in the spring of 2020. And what happened was that I live in this neighborhood in Baltimore. I described the neighborhood. And then in my neighborhood, this white fox started appearing in the summer of 2019. It's just like this strange, anomalous creature that nobody could quite explain. And I'd be walking my dog every evening, and I was like, "What is that thing?" And other people had seen it, but I would often be by myself when I saw it. And I'd start taking pictures with my iPhone, and so all the pictures in the book are taken with the iPhone, and hence they're kind of blurry and pixelated and that sort of thing. But I talk a lot about the quality of the images, or as you'll see, I'll read an excerpt. And then there's a section where the fox disappears, and it's fall of 2019. And then 2020 arrives, and not only did we go down like full global lockdown with COVID, I myself became extremely ill, and I was hospitalized for several months, and it was grave, put it that way. I was on opiates most of that time, and so I don't remember a lot of it. This whole narrative was just like of those first few months of 2020 are kind of gone to me. I remember different little things I would come to, out of dilaudid deliriums, and sort of like, where am I kind of thing. And I would take a few pictures with my iPhone, and I put a lot of the story together through texts that my wife sent to my family, and through medical records. And then by the spring of 2020, I was at home convalescing, and I couldn't even walk for a while. And then, it was the COVID lockdown, right? And so it was like, to me, it was like, I didn't even notice because I was already totally out of it. So it's about, it's about many things, but so let me that's the kind of general outline of like what happened. And so I just want to read a couple of excerpts, and then hopefully there'll be some questions. Just check the time here. We're doing good. All right. So the book opens with a series of skies, because the sky, figures predominantly the time of day and the type of sky, the atmosphere. It was a very atmospheric book. And it starts with 4 little lines, epigraphs, which I want to read to you. Narratives can make us understand. Photographs do something else. They haunt us. By Sontag. I used to think I couldn't lose anyone if I photographed them enough. Anne Golden. Narratives in which one thing follows from the previous thing are usually imaginary. Sarah Manguso, Two Kinds of Decay. I am but a small noise. I have several noises in me. Tristan Zara. One thing that I forgot to leave out, that in 2020, not only the COVID, my own illness, but my mom, who had been suffering from dementia and sort of slowly disappearing, which I talk about in the book, passes during the COVID period. And my wife's sister, Angie, who was an incredible person, died of cancer, breast cancer. And so while I was very ill myself, my wife is returning to Germany. My wife's German, to basically her sister dying in her hands, and then have returned to US right away as COVID sort of locking everything down to kind of tend to me. It was a shit show, shall we say. But I learned a lot. I think we all learned a lot in that process about love and tenderness. All right, so let me get started here. It starts with a fox. That's my backyard. I live in the Mount Washington neighborhood of Baltimore. It is a hilly, tree-filled area that in the mid-19th century was a summer getaway for well-to-do Baltimoreans. Located in the northwest corner of the city, it retains a sense of geographic separation, with still some undeveloped patches of woods and a leg of the Jones Falls running through it. The neighborhood is home to a variety of wildlife: deer, raccoons, fox, groundhogs, rabbits, owls, hawks, ravens, turkey vultures, and occasional eagles. It is generally a friendly and progressive place. People are civil and watch out for each other. I like reading the neighborhood listserv, not with the hope of nabbing a used garden trowel, but for the unintentional poetry of it, the random association of objects, quotidian needs, and civic announcements. In early summer of 2019, among the usual sundry topics, the traffic concerns, lost cats, and used clothing giveaways, there have been a handful of exclamatory entries. Strange animal in my backyard last night. And white dog, I think, trotting along Kelly Avenue. Is it yours? Almost every evening, I walk our dog Sparky. I am always happy when my wife Bea accompanies me. Sometimes we take the lower loop, going down past the community arboretum and the rushing and litter-filled waters of the Western Run along Kelly Avenue to circle back home. More often, we take the upper loop. Our street dead ends, but there is a near hidden path that snakes through the black walnut and tulip poplar trees up to Dixon Hill. The path, a trickle of asphalt, was originally supposed to be a road when the city extended our street in the late 1940s to build the dozen modest brick-style Cape homes, one of which we live in, but it was deemed too steep to be safe. That lack of foresight in urban planning turned out to be a gift to future residents, leaving our street quiet and welcoming to wild creatures of the non-human sort. Because it's often nearing dusk, climbing up to Dixon Hill has something of a ritual feeling, like ascending towards another world, a passage to the ineffable. As if nodding in consent to an invisible force, I bow my head to follow the shadowy path, then raise my eyes to the fading light illuminating the clouds above. I'm reluctant to speak during this transition. If she is with me, I feel compelled to hold Bea's hand, and when our fingers entwine, I sense a fastening to something beyond ourselves. During the summer, the path is narrowed by encroaching Swedish ivy, insistent forsythia branches, and bushy viburnum. We sometimes interrupt the grazing of a small herd or parcel of deer led by the dominant female. Once we were startled when a young buck emerged from behind an oak leaf hydrangea, its fuzzy antlers like a spiky halo catching the last bit of light filtering through the canopy. Planted near the top of the path is an ancient black walnut, whose ragged bark indentations and hollows cohere into a somewhat menacing expression. It is a guardian tree. I think of the Ents in Tolkien's Middle-earth. Hello, old one, I whisper as I pass. I'm going to skip ahead to one part here. There's a series of homes on the top of on Dixon Hill behind our house that have been purchased by the Chimes, which is an organization that takes care of developmentally disabled people. So I talk about that a little bit here. Where to start here? Chimes, an organization devoted to caring for people with intellectual developmental disabilities, purchased a handful of the empty structures clustered near one another at the very top of the hill. Now, on pleasant afternoons, year-round, patients sit on porches waving to the infrequent passersby. There's one particularly tormented fellow who screams and moans in the early evenings. His howls can be heard around the neighborhood, cascading down from the top of Dixon Hill in an avalanche of distress. While impossible to fully imagine his internal afflictions, what demons he battles, the harrowing sound pierces any shield of indifference, inciting existential dread in anyone within earshot. There's a sign sprouting from a small patch of grass in front of the home of this unfortunate soul, which, in a somewhat flowery script, announces Chimes. Each time I pass that sign, I remember Tristan Tzara's poem, his epic poem, Approximate Man. Skip that part. His poem, Approximate Man, written between 1925 and 1930, is an extraordinary text wavering between Dada-esque nihilism and a spiritual questing that borders on a grudging benevolence. The first verse contains the lines, "The bells chime for no reason, and we too, chime bells for no reason, and we too, will rejoice in the noise of the chains that will chime within us with the bells." This phrase about the chiming of the bells repeats scattered throughout the poem, often in variation and coupled with other phrases. I'd been haunted by this poem since I first read it in my early 20s. A working class kid growing up in Irish Catholic Boston, I was a reader, an art student, and as far from Tristan Tzara's world as one could get. Yet Tzara's poem burrowed into my soul and took permanent residence there. Tzara's poem does not answer its own questions, yet there was something ringing in its verses, the relationship between sound, meaning, and nonsense that made my insides resonate. This is the mystery of art. How does a poem, painting, melody call across decades, centuries, geopolitical borders to seduce and overwhelm some unsuspecting recipients? Oh, sorry, I went too far. I walk with Sparky, sometimes accompanied by Bia, and sometimes with our teenage son, Aiden. When my mother was still well enough to travel, she too would often come along. Whatever the circumstance, alone or with a loved one, when I see the sign for chimes, I whisper to myself the lines from Approximate Man. And although Tzara only implied it, being a master of the obvious, I finish the phrase, and we too chime for no reason. Some early evenings when I am sitting in my garden and hear the wailing of my tormented neighbor, I say it out loud. The bells chime for no reason, and we too chime for no reason. I'm not even certain what it means, that there's no point in life, no divine plan. Do I believe that? But like a chorus of a popular song that won't let go, it has become an embedded invocation, as involuntary as breathing. In a perverse way, I find the sentiment liberating, hopeful even. We chime for no reason because we are involuntary vessels for song. We resonate godlessly. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead to the part where the white fox makes an appearance. And in the book, the pages, the text, the pages are like a midnight blue. A few evenings after the summer solstice, I first caught a glimpse of the white fox. It was almost dark. A glowing spectral figure appeared, vanished, and reappeared from the shallow clefts just beyond the copse of black walnut trees. I made an involuntary low gurgling sound, something like a visceral purr, which in future sightings I tried to suppress. I remembered the listserv reports and wondered if I was seeing what the neighbors had seen. Sparky, who normally chases any nearby rabbit, squirrel, groundhog, deer, or even low-flying birds of prey, seemed oblivious. That first sighting only lasted a few minutes. I tried to take pictures with my phone, zooming in as close as I could, resulting in a handful of blurry impressions. It was as if the white fox resisted representation. Like 19th century spirit photographs or photos of UFOs or Bigfoot, my white fox images were appropriately mysterious with their lack of clarity and pixelated graininess, perfect aesthetic analogs for the otherworldly. But as hard evidence, they were a bit unconvincing. I could have gotten my hands on a high-end DSLR in the attempt to get clearer, higher resolution images, but I dismissed the idea because there would be something predatory and disrespectful in the insistence on clarity, as if having a camera gave me the right to see everything. I'm going to skip ahead here. The appearance of the white fox catalyzed a summer of wonder and contemplation. Like a pilgrim who doesn't have to travel very far to experience the sacred, I climbed Dixon Hill almost every evening for 6 weeks that the fox revealed itself. Each day as the sun lowered, I felt myself going quiet, more reluctant to discuss domestic details. Leashing Sparky and leaving the house, I would announce, "I'm going to see the white fox. Do you want to join me?" If my wife or son were busy or not at home, I was content to go alone. I felt a rare solemnity, a reverence for the experience, which I would not admit for sounding ridiculous. As I climbed the path at the end of the street, I examined, even interrogated my life choices. Sometimes the bells of the Sacred Heart Church rang out, calling the faithful. Having grown up Catholic and served as an altar boy, the word holy conjures an inchoate mix of associations. I think it's possible for people or places to be holy, but I resent the unearned application of the term as much as I detest sanctimony. There's a scene in Robert Frank's film, Pull My Daisy, which Jack Kerouac wrote and narrates, where one of the silly bohemian poets incessantly asks a visiting bishop if things are holy. Is everything holy, bishop? Are alligators holy? Is the world holy? Is basketball holy? Is the organ of man holy? The bishop, confused and maybe a little irritated, replies, "What? Holy, holy," and changes the subject. Oops, sorry. I posted some images on social media. I had alerted a select few neighbors who I thought would appreciate and protect the secret about where and when they might have an encounter. On a couple of occasions, we sat quietly in the grass around the picnic table, swifts overhead, followed by bats careening after mosquitoes, some hooting in the distance from a barred owl, and then a gathering blue-black dusk, snowy white ears poking above the little dip in the field. In late June, fireflies rose from the grass like ascending stars. Our ghostly visitor would sometimes leap and gulp at the tiny sparks with an audible snap of its snout. Foxes are omnivorous, but the nutritional value of a few fireflies cannot add up to much. I assumed it was simply ingesting additional luminosity. There is an Apache legend. The trickster fox stole fire from fireflies to help warm helpless, naked, shivering humanity. Perhaps the Piscataway people who inhabited this land before the European onslaught have a similar story about the fox. Some evenings were so hushed I felt tucked in the folds between worlds, privy to a parallel universe without humans. While being swallowed in a deepening twilight, a soundless drama unfurled all around me. Grazing deer, altocumulus clouds stacking up overhead, glowing with the last slanting rays of the sun, a red-shouldered hawk circling in the zenith, a barred owl landing on a nearby branch, the white fox weaving in and out of sight. And one last section piece about the fox. Maybe the white fox was not a living creature at all, but a restless portal, a temporal glitch, a coherent mist in the form of a fox. It could be a psychopomp, one of those mythical beings that escort souls between worlds, depicted in ancient Greek and Egyptian funerary art as anthropomorphized entities, dogs, horses, ravens, or owls. I spent a lot of time fantasizing what would happen if I followed the white fox, like Alice down the rabbit hole, or the children in the Chronicles of Narnia, through the back of the wardrobe. I instinctively knew that I would have to go alone. In the time of the white fox, I felt as if I was dissolving. Did I wish to dissolve? If one aches for dissolution, for formlessness, is that despondency or a longing for transcendence? So that section is followed by 27 spreads of the white fox, and then leads to the sort of section that takes place in the fall. And I'll just read one little piece from that. In mid-August, the white fox stopped appearing. Evening after evening, I walked the loop to Dixon Hill, stood by the picnic table, tossed the ball to Sparky, and waited. I was forlorn. In the approaching dusk, I scrolled through the photos on my phone, hundreds of them, mostly blurry and indistinct. I was frustrated at not having captured a proper likeness of the fox, but also found the failure phenomenologically appropriate. Photographers can be greedy. One image is seldom enough. There's something fundamentally predatory about photography. The most egregious examples of images of pain and tragedy that circulate the media like dirty money. But even relatively mundane photographs can be an expression of power, demonstrating an often unexamined sense of entitlement in representing others. Why would I expect this manufactured digital device to capture something so ephemeral, so transitory, so otherworldly? While I understood there are some things that are beyond representation, my stubborn need for photographic evidence was difficult to relinquish. The autumn unfolded without any dramatic mystical encounters. There was continuing disgust and horror what was happening at the highest levels of our government, but having a young person in the house, I resisted indulging my apocalyptic pessimism. B and I do not avoid talking about politics around our son, but we try not to obsess. We don't want to instill hopelessness or cynicism in him. We are both teachers, and our son is in high school. So our dinner table discussions mostly revolved around class preparation, assignments, grades, pedagogical challenges, and the Boston Celtics. And atrocious school lunches. I still hoped for sightings of the white fox while walking Sparky in the evenings, but it never happened. Instead, like an experiment in cosmology in which every act of observation recreates the universe anew, I stopped in gratitude and astonishment to watch Bia walking up the hill on the autumn path to Dixon Hill, walking up ahead on the autumn path to Dixon Hill. Making an image of a loved one moving away in a landscape with back turned towards the camera produces in me an instant melancholy, an irresistible marriage of photography and longing. All right. So a couple of little passages from the sort of the darker parts of it, and we'll stop. All right. Sorry. Where's the thing stuck to? All right, this is a section about, again, sort of waking up out of these sort of dilaudid days. Dilaudid is an opiate. It's a very strong opiate, if you don't know. When the anesthetizing effects of the dilaudid wore off a bit, I looked around and tried to orient myself. There was a calendar and a clock on the wall, but I did not understand what day it was. I barely felt embodied. I was there and not there. I reached for my phone to make photographs in the attempt to anchor myself in time and place. I took pictures of myself, which were sad and scary and a bit soft because the lens was smudged. I took pictures of unfamiliar buildings and parking lots outside my window. My mind cleared for a moment. I noticed all little icons attached to objects around my bed. The knife and fork symbols on the fold-away table, the double face representing the mirror, and other inscrutable signs. I thought about writing a little essay about the semiotics of my hospital room. Martha Rossler's early feminist performance video, Semiotics of the Kitchen, came to mind. And as if to reassert my artistic practice, I took pictures of little sculptures. Sculptural arrangements I made with objects on my bedside table. I didn't have a lot to work with, but the paper cup said I should seize the day. I think that's funny. Anyway, necrotizing pancreatitis, that's what I had. And then other things happened. The term haunted me. I was such a literalist that even in my drugged out state, I had visions of a city of the dead, a Boschian hell where nothing is truly dead, only forever tormented. My pancreas was going there and taking me with it bit by bit. In the necropolis, there was no horizon line, no escape from an infinity of writhing bodies. Grotesque demons armed with tridents, pincers, pokers, and pitchforks incessantly prod you to justify your existence. One is engulfed by a violent clamoring with no possibility of respite. For eternity, you must proclaim your worth, and if you rest for even a millisecond, your soul will be destroyed. Kind of sounds like the art world. Some demons were restless, exiting the necropolis to creep into my room at night. There was a device at the foot of my hospital bed that provided intermittent pneumatic compression to help prevent blood clots in the legs, an IPC. The device inflates and deflates the cuffs that are affixed to the calves. The compressor grunted as the calf squeezed my legs, and then with slow whoosh, the air releases a mechanical sigh. When not in use, the clear tubes wrapped around the bottom of the bed like a garden hose. From my perspective, the metal screws became eyes and the tubes the mane of the Medusa. It's a case of extreme pareidolia. I woke from a sleep or drug-induced stupor, and she was there, peeking over the foot of my bed. I tried to make friends. I waved and mumbled hello, but after what seemed like several days, I was angry and resentful at her constant surveillance. I told her to go away. I took photos in the middle of the night as if to shoo her away, and as to provide proof and to provide proof of the unsettling visitations. I gave her the finger, but she was stubborn and full of malevolent intentions. I mean, I remember taking that picture vaguely, and like she was crawling over the bottom of the bed towards me. Anyway, all fun and games. All right, so that's the view from one night from my hospital room at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And then there's a longer passage about convalescence and COVID and the sort of my attempts to come back to what I call narrative embodiment. So there's a lot of references in there. So I'm just going to end with a short passage here. Art and literature may be reflective of the time in which they were conceived, but they are also gestures of acknowledgement from the past, notes to the future, that others have felt and seen things that correlate with our experiences. Such encounters make the world less lonely. In her essay, On Being Ill, Virginia Woolf describes staring at the sky during her months of illness and convalescence as a cinema of cloudscapes. She observed from her sickbed, quote, "Divinely beautiful is also divinely heartless. The dogs bark, the rooks rising in a net fall in a net upon the elm trees. The wave of life flings itself indefatigably. It is only the recumbent who know what, after all, nature is at no pains to conceal, that she in the end will conquer. Heat will leave the world. Stiff with frost, we shall cease to drag ourselves about the fields. Ice will lie thick upon factory and engine, and the sun will go out." The term temporal dysphoria has been adopted to describe the strange experience during the time of COVID. I've already been living in that dysphoric state for several months. I was an honorary citizen. When the haze of hospitalization began to clear, I found that there was something familiar, almost comforting about that isolation. I occupied an impaired body with significant physical limitations, yet there was a kind of clarity that comes after a cataclysm. My view from the couch was as if everything had burned down, and I was wandering around the smoldering ruins, hoping to salvage a few essential fragments. In the late 1970s, the poet Lucille Clifton, who certainly had her own struggles with historical context, wrote a series of short poems titled "The Message from the Ones," which she claimed were collaborations with the spirit world rather than discrete verses authored by herself alone. Sometimes the message poems were warnings about the consequences of short-sighted human behavior, reminding us that we are more than just flesh. These texts exude a ghostly, disembodied, otherworldly quality that reverberate like prayers across a devastated landscape. I cannot help but wonder who were the ones sitting across from her table when Clifton composed this poem, "Unless You Insist on Wings," and told her, "The angels have no wings. They come to you wearing their own clothes. They have learned to love you and will keep coming unless you insist on wings." I lay on the couch for 2 more months trying to piece together what happened to me in the hospital. And when I did not get very far, I often fantasized climbing up to Dixon Hill to look for the white fox. My experience in illness was irreducible to narrative, as the white fox was resistant to description, photographic or textual. In my mind's eye, I passed the sentinel tree and approached the chimes while muttering, "The bells chime for no reason, and we too chime for no reason." Can narrative repair what is broken or find what is lost? Or is it a necessary delusion required to simply exist in any kind of meaningful way? And I'll end there. Thank you. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anybody has any observations and they want to bring anything up, happy to entertain it. Yeah.
I'm curious about the name, why you chose St. Lucy, because it feels like your way of seeing is more in line with the rejected pagan Suda. So I'm wondering how that works in your mind, if she was rejecting that.
That's a good question. I think that, Catholics are basically, they're pagans in costume, But I think for me, the original attraction to St. Lucy was when I had an online journal before I had the press, and I was just looking for a name. And I was actually reading Blewett by Maggie Nelson, and she talks about St. Lucy. And then I remember I went to Catholic schools, and I was an altar boy, and I knew some of these stories. And I'm like, oh right, the protector of sight. And I thought, what a wonderful sort of image for what was initially an online journal about photography. And it sort of touched my Catholic roots. And there's also something very kind of weird and strange about the hand holding the eyes and the relationship between, the haptic and vision, which I was also interested in. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but yeah.
The second part of the question, I mean, I'm a big believer that photography is not a pagan practice in itself, because we're literally taking images of the world around us and kind of worshiping them in a very unique way.
I can go with that.
But the second part of my question, you used the word mysticism when you were talking about this book that you just read some excerpts from. And I'm wondering if you could define what like mysticism in your mind? Like, do you have a succinct way of explaining what that?
I don't. I mean, I think part of the exploration of this book is like trying to describe the things that are indescribable, right? I mean, that are sort of beyond representation. So the fox, despite my insistence, resisted full representation, right? My attempts to piece together a narrative were failures, right? But I think that in failure, we create something new, right? That the images of the white fox, had they been sharp and accurate and like you could actually study it, that I think they wouldn't be so interesting, right? I think there's something, the aesthetics or the analogous to the kind of work, because I think that it kind of helps create a feeling, it's like an affect, right, of feeling otherness. And so I think for me, I was certainly exploring the mystical, but not knowing what that is. That certainly was, when people said, "Oh, the fox is a harbinger of all those horrible things happen to you." Well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I just knew that when I felt stuck, I felt like I was circling a kind of black hole in some ways, in 2022, and I just couldn't stop thinking about these things that I couldn't remember. I knew that I had to start with the white fox and move forward and try to piece together a narrative that I knew that was necessarily incomplete, but in its incompleteness that would somehow, I guess, paradoxically capture that sense of what had happened. I don't know if that was an extra question. Anyone else? Yeah.
As I understand it, the time that the white fox was reoccurring was kind of ended by your forming one kind of came after the other.
No, you may have gotten that impression because I was just jumping around in text, but it was for 6 weeks since the summer of 2019. So sometime in August that the white fox stopped appearing. And then the fall happened sort of normally. I was dealing with, my job and family, my wife, visiting my mom who was disappearing from dementia. There's a lot in there about my mom's dementia. So something disappearing and losing her, losing her narrative. But then, so the white fox stopped being the white fox in this late summer of 2019.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what is interesting to me is this kind of, it has an ending, but not really an ending. You became sick, but at a later point. And so the white fox kind of defines the space of time where you kind of let it fill in the space, like you said, 6 weeks. And did you have like a something that you said, okay, I'm not going to look anymore past this point. I'm not going to keep searching for it. I'm not going to be open to still seeing it. Did it kind of define time for you only to a certain point? Or is it something where you are kind of leaving it open-ended?
Oh, I mean, I just, I'm an addict. I want to see what I thought all the time, every day. So, I still look for the fox, 5 years later. No, I didn't stop thinking about the fox at all. I mean, I kept, walking the dog, looking in the shadows, but it was a particular period, and it remains, in that sense, it's also kind of a lucid thing. Like, what was that phenomenon? What should it have meaning? I mean, I guess things have meaning if you give them meaning. And I think that if I hadn't gotten ill, I don't know. I mean, if my mom hadn't passed, all that stuff had happened, I'm not sure I would have gone back to kind of frame that whole time period, starting with white fox.
Yeah. No, I said ending.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
What do you think is the relationship between photography and the otherworldly or paranormal?
Well, so photography, was born basically at the time of the rise of spiritualism, in the sort of mid to late 19th century. And so photography, along with what one scholar, Jeffrey Scott, calls other technologies of disembodiment, like the telegraph, the phonograph, cinema, later cinema, et cetera, were technology which took bodies and put them elsewhere where the bodies weren't. And so a number of people were interested in the occult, mediums in particular, mostly women, became associated with these new technologies, like the Fox sisters, you may know, up in Rochester, the tapping, rapping, table rappers. I mean, that was right around the time of the telegraph was invented, right? So there's a relationship between these new technologies and the forms in which we imagine the other world, right? And so it's not surprising that when photography appeared, that it would be used to kind of as an evidentiary force to kind of prove that there was another world, and that certain people were more sensitive than others and could communicate with the other side. And you probably know the stories about Mummler and that kind of thing. And like, I mean, I think there are technological reasons why that showed up, and who the hell knows, right? But I think that nobody knew what photography was really. I mean, they kind of knew. I mean, Daguerre knew what he was doing to an extent, but like, how does it work? It's just something. This image suddenly appears, and what is that weird blurry thing, and all that kind of stuff. It lends itself to a kind of paranormal imagination, if you will, and so I just think that that's the reason why spirit photography was so prevalent in the 18th century into the early 20th century. As you know, they kept changing the aesthetics of the other world. They kept changing. It wasn't just enough to have kind of blurry pictures of like faces in the background that Mummler did. So there was ectoplasm, like coming out of people's noses in buttholes and stuff. It just got weirder and weirder. It's kind of like a kind of the spectacle of the other world became more and more strange and sort of grotesque in a way. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Well, the reason why I was asking is you seem interested. Photography tends to quantify and objectify,
yeah.
give it a physical presence. You seem to be interested in the other end of the spectrum where photography becomes blurry, suggestive, imprecise.
I am to an extent. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, that I did a lot of work on Ted Sirius, who's this guy who did these photographs with project thoughts onto Polaroid film. And I'm a skeptic. I think he was a charlatan, but nonetheless, the pictures are amazing. Like these blurry pictures of his thought. Like just thinking about that, it was thrilling to me. I don't really believe that he did. That's but it doesn't matter what I believe. What I do believe, I'm interested in the aesthetics of the otherworldly, right? I'm not sure that I'm a believer myself. I'm interested in the way that evidentiary power photography is used to prove something that isn't there, right? So I think that for all photographs, whether they're a mundane photograph of the street scene or whatever, always show something that's not there, right? Or suggest something that's not there. They suggest certain kind of narratives or context that I think I love that. I love that sort of the kind of things that surround it that photographs suggest, as opposed to their purely indexical power.
Yeah, and your pictures of the white fox are suggestive. They're not National Geographic photographs. They're blurry, pixelated suggestions.
Yeah, by necessity, because I just had this thing, it's dark.
I can accept that sort of fictional presence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Physical photographs.
If you saw an actual photograph of a ghost, you wouldn't believe it was a ghost. Right? Or like a big photo, like really clearly defined, you'd be like, oh,
That is interesting.
In the way you contextualize it, book at least, those photos, forget about that it was an icon and all that stuff. The fact is that we're having an experience that is related to these visitations that you had, that in fact, in some way related to when you were sick, right? This unknown idea of this thing is a kind of vision rather than, again, something that's indexical, right?
Yeah.
So forget about all that other stuff. It seems to me that the least way you can contextualize it, because they are meant, that it is meant to be an experience that is in some way otherworldly and not just for you.
Yeah.
In that moment. Which is where it seems to resonate for me.
Yeah. I mean, I requested my medical records in Johns Hopkins. There was this fit, And I had read them. They meant nothing to me. You know, I mean, it was just a bunch of like meditations and procedures and observations. Some of the observations were very interesting, but they spoke nothing to my experience, right? But that kind of weird thing that was climbing over my bed, you know, that speaks to my experience, you know. I feel like that was just, I think that that was as real as anything, as the necrotizing pancreatitis of the doctors, let's call it. You know, or, you know, that the white fox, as blurry and strange or as ephemeral, as transitory, as elusive as it was, created a kind of a world that I lived in. It defined my world for 6 weeks. And in some ways still does, you know, it still has this kind of lasting effect. I mean, it just is through visitation. I mean, whether it's otherworldly or whether it was mystical, why not? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of that, except that I had these experiences that are beyond kind of the quotidian. Right? And they change the way that I, you know, interact with the world and other people. Yeah.
You mentioned Larry Sultan.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any good Larry stories.
Sure, Larry. Let's say about Larry.
The reason I ask is because I got to live and work in San Francisco when the museum did the first posthumous solo exhibition of Larry Sultan. So it was like a big homecoming. And everybody that's involved in the photography world in San Francisco was a student of Larry's.
That's right.
And I was struck by getting to know all these people, how many of them say they still have conversations with Larry. And his legacy as a teacher.
It's kind of amazing. Did you see him? You know, Nick Meyer did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to, explain how, but that's true. I mean, I was at the ICP book fair this weekend, and this mutual friend of Justin and I, Nick Meyer, studied with him, and he's like,
Right at the tail end, right?
yeah, it's a little weird. I mean, but I'm the same way. I mean, it made a deep impression on me. I mean, in my essay, in Larry Sultan, I come from a very working class family, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of unemployment, a lot of rage. I didn't know, this is a weird thing I admit in public, but I didn't know what it was like. How could you be it sounds like a weird thing to say, and an artist? What does that mean? And I think that in Larry, I felt like I found the first, oh, that's something. And it had to do with he was smart, he was kind, he was incisive, he was funny, he was generous, he was a lot of things. He just was a special person. And he was an incredible teacher. He was dedicated to the students and helping the students find their own voice. And so there was I just felt very influenced by him. I'm not going to tell you other stories about him. I helped him. He threw me a bone once when I was so broke, in graduate school. It's like, I know I worked at my house. You can come work with the guys. I'm like, sure, and we were turning shingles off his house, and I took a big piece of wood and I threw it into the dumpster and it went through my hand. And basically he had to spend 12 hours with me at the emergency room. We were trying to remove his hand. I was like a Christ figure.
But a good Larry story.
It's a good Larry story. He was good humor. He took pictures wait, hold it up. Emergency room, right? The wound is bleeding with a big chunk of wood sticking out of it. You're hold it like that. And he's put it in his camera. So that's the way it's done.
Thanks.
Gary, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to ask the tech question. Did you frame in camera or did you use your iPhone to take pictures?
I don't even know what that means. I mean, I just did
Did you expand it or did you
Oh, I try to zoom in. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, zoom in?
Oh,
Did you do that?
yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah, the really blurry ones are the zoomed in ones.
I was thinking that, but I was thinking also there's a question, you just take it and then expand it in your computer
Photoshop, like, get into the pixel, what's in there, see if I can get any clarity. It's like, we will remain, mysterious.
So did you crop them? Or are they like the photograph?
Did what?
Did you crop the photographs or did you use?
Wow. That's probably, they have put them in the book, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I tried to make a nice picture, make it look good on the page.
I think once you leave film, it doesn't matter. Oh, really?
Yeah, I studied with those people in the 70s, following their rules, like no cropping, full frame. Yeah.
I just found out that recently.
No care about it. Anybody else?
I have one of those questions that's an observation of mine.
Right.
But just the decision to print full bleed has an incredible effect on the totality of the meaning of the book. It just, something as ostensibly simple
What
as.
could you elaborate? What do you mean by that?
Because it inserts you into, it's this, there's this world, and this is the world out there that we can't capture, which I think is emphasized also by the fact that you couldn't capture the white fox. He was uncapturable. That was, that's the point, and that's emphasized by the, lack of focus or whatever technicality you want to say, but that it, the full bleed says, sort of, to me, one of the subtexts of the book is that I'm searching for linkages. I know everything's related because it's within my life, which is some kind of whole. But you're looking for both the narrative structure and for how did these things get linked, except by deciding to throw them into a single book. But I feel like the full bleed.
No, I think I understand, and that was obviously a conscious decision. I mean, I wanted to bleed, to get away from the idea that it's, first of all, it's a photograph and has a frame, but it's a world, and there's the next world, there's the next world. Yes.
Probably not.
Exactly.
And also that it's this notion of, all these experiences and sights resist being held, resist being grounded. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much for the observation. Something that's in the book, I talk about this. There's an Irish writer named Carrie Doherty. She's a contemporary Irish writer, poet, also writes nonfiction. She wrote this book called Thin Places. It's about the Irish landscape and violence, the violence of the Irish, And she talks about the Celtic traditions of like these thin places where there's like this space, the veil between the worlds opens up or thin. And she talks about certain places in Ireland, certain experiences that she had, in the Irish landscape. Somebody who as she talks about in her book, suffered personal violence and the violence of cultural violence, right? So Gray and Protestants and all that kind of stuff. It's a really powerful book. It's called Thin Places. I would recommend it. Anyway, but I really was thinking about that. Really inspired me in this book in relationship, thinking about that Dixon Hill behind my house. I felt like for that time was a thin place. Like it was a place where, I just felt like I was not. I knew where I was, but it didn't feel like it was where I was. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And it happened. It doesn't feel that way now. I still walk with my dog there. It doesn't feel that way the same way. And it's not just that I felt like the white fox, obviously I projected a lot, but the white fox created a ripple effect. Something happened. There was kind of like energy there. And that's what I believe. I can't prove it.
Well, I think you fully embody that in the way that the book is produced and written and it looks, so this feels to me like a, it's sort of, you completed an incomplete experience.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And I just want to say I'm very comfortable with that incompletion. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry?
Even though you have a regular meeting with the White Fox, you never took a different capture device beside the icon.
No, I resisted that. Yeah. I don't have a really great camera. I mean, like what, some high-end DSLR. I could have got one to teach, and I could get one. It just seemed wrong. I'm like, that seemed like, oh, this is perfect. But wait, let me get the right device. Let's ruin the moment. And but what would that prove? Even if I got a sharper picture with more detail, what is that proving? More than that, than my experiences in those images that I have. I feel like those incomplete images are actually more indicative of what the feeling was.
I did. Seeing these photos and hearing them talk about them, I was thinking about W.E. Seabow, Rings of Saturn, and his other books, where he has like 4 books or so where he's ostensibly the walking traveler.
That's right.
Thinking and walking through history. And he illustrates each of his books with photos, small black and white photos that are supposed to relate to the incidents in time and history that he's talking about. And they're supposed to be illuminating, or he cites them as being illuminating, like, see this photo, and I am in the 5th row, in 3rd grade, and here is my 150 classmates or something. And the experience is that you see the photo, you believe what he is saying, but you peer at the photo, it's grainy, it's black and white, and you are not really seeing, you are not really being informed by the photo, you are being less informed in a way. And so it speaks to, for me and for your white photos, photos of white box, how you cannot transfer like a personal experience, that it is kind of an impossibility to, you can allude to it. You can show kind of like a out of focus memoir of the experience, but it kind of speaks to the impossibility of sharing out that firsthand experience, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah. That's a big topic. I know that Rings of Saturn in particular is very influential on me, and this idea that he's walking on this path and talking about the landscape, he's looking at that thing, that place, and then he goes off the path. But he goes off the path, literally and figuratively. Right? He starts talking about something else, and then he comes back to the path, literally and figuratively, in the text. And I just think that's really interesting. I love his writing for that. I want to say something about the relationship between word and image. Thinking of, that I'm interested in for St. Lucie, is one of the reasons why St. Lucie is a kind of, most of the books that I've published have a kind of interesting relationship between word and image, right? And I've also been interested in that my whole life. Like, I've never quite decided, right? Like, am I a photographer or am I a writer? I mean, just as a photographer, you know what I mean? I don't know if you write. I've never seen you writing, but I mean, you're the real thing. You're committed to the craft, and I've never been quite committed to the craft in that same way. I've always been interested in the relationship between word and image. My friend Corinne here, I think, with whom we're making a book next year, by the way, St. Lucie, is really interested in the relationship between word and image and how they can interact and how they inform and undercut each other, etc. So that's something that I think that I love about Seabow, but also something that I hope to happen in some of the white plots in particular.
Just one last question, and maybe this would be an entree for people to take a look at the books on the table over there. But how do you select what books you're going to publish? This is obviously a very creative, deliberate choice for each volume. And how do you make that selection?
It's been organic. I've been working on basically 2 or 3 books a year. And so it's very so good at, and I work on one book at a time with the artists. It's like very clever. It takes almost a year to do it, from conception to printing. And, we're not interested in we're not, sort of having, we're not interested in expanding, turning into an empire, right? It's all about the relationship, about working with somebody and having a deep, trustful, collaborative relationship that produces something that we believe should be in the world on some level. And so, so obviously the choice is really careful. I'm careful about. I only would work with people that I felt like I trusted, or they trusted me, and whose work I love, and whose work I think needs to be in the world more, in a different way. So there's that. I mean, people do approach me with proposals. I generally don't, because I'm scheduled through 2026 now, like working at, maybe we're going to try to do 5 books next year, which is one of the but we'll see what happens with that. But, so anyway, it's very careful, but I would say that I haven't been like, oh, this is an onslaught. I think some people see, they're like, oh, that's not for me. I mean, if you were, a certain kind of, documentary photographer was doing whatever, it's not quite the thing, so, I don't know. I think, like Clea McKenna approached me because she had seen Bree's book and something else, and she really liked the quality of that book, and, and I was like, I loved it. I already knew her work. I loved it. I was really like, yes, I'll work with you.
So it's more like an artistic collaboration.
Absolutely.
Connection.
I'm completely collaborative, and I don't think of it as, I think of it as like, it's not like a big culture thing. It's like, I want to work with people who are interested in me and who are, that we respect each other.
But then beside the designer, is there another collaborator? Besides Foxy and so?
In this book, yeah. I mean, only sense that I gave it to a few friends to read early on. I mean, but no, I just.
It really is you.
For better, for worse. I mean, and like Fox, certainly. Yeah, I am to blame for all of that. Yeah.
But you did credit the designer earlier. It does look like a beautiful.
Oh yeah, no, I can't. I'm not a designer. I can't do that. No, that's a particular skill, and Burnett, who did most of the books over there, is incredible, and Caleb does great work too. And I really wanted to work with him and see how it went. And it went great. It's amazing. We're going to do another book together next year. Not my work, but something else. Thank you so much. Oh. I'll take this ebook if you want to look at it, and I think that the copies of White Fox up here, each can be buys in March.